What do your epigenetics, the makeup of who you are, and your 401k have in common? Well, that's what we talk about on this week's episode of the Next Better podcast. I have John Sabes, who has done 5 Ironmans, but also started and exited on 2 companies, which is huge if you aren't in the entrepreneurial space. He's been an entrepreneur for over 35 years in the financial industry, and his work really brings to light this idea of what it means to be financially wealthy and generally wealthy. What's the difference? Well, that's what we talk about in this week's episode with Next Better Podcast. Check it out. John Sabes, my friend, thank you so much. I'm so excited to have this conversation around longevity and health and wealth with you. Thanks for coming on board.
Thanks, Coach Woody. Great to be here.
Absolutely. So let's hop right into it. There's a lot of conversations around finances and financial well-being. There's a lot of conversations around longevity, and I'm all about Venn diagrams and how they all come together and making complex concepts a little bit more simplistic. So if we were looking at a Venn diagram and one circle was longevity and one circle was like financial wellness, what would be that overlapping piece? What's in that middle?
I think the overlapping in the middle there is your health. I guess so. I would certainly include the health as part of that Venn diagram, and so I would put 3 circles, right? Your health, your financial health, your physical health, and then that and then in the center, in the true center, right, is ultimate happiness or experiencing happiness for as long as possible, and that's that longevity piece. So longevity is this most invaluable asset that we're all blessed with, that many of us take for granted. And so for me anyways, and for a lot of folks, is to get the good things in life for as long as possible. And so that's where that health, I believe, would overlap there. So you are in such a good position to enjoy the latter years of your life.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. You mentioned that you had got a chance to kind of listen to the episode we did with Lloyd Ross, and thanks again for tuning into that. And he talked a lot about money buys happiness, and it almost sounds like this is resonating similarly with you, of this idea of when you have healthy money and healthy body, then you can find yourself in a much healthier place mentally, physically, emotionally. Would that be the case when you think about the work that you do?
Yeah, I mean, in the research that I did for the book, a couple of really important things emerged. And again, I'm a serial entrepreneur. I've been working in and around the financial services industry for decades, the life insurance. And what I would like to say is increasing the odds of experiencing the good things in life for as long as possible. There's no guarantees. But if you have good financial health and you have good, sound physical and mental health, right, you improve the odds of experiencing the good things in life again for as long as possible. You know, I became aware of a study from the Brookings Institute several years ago, and the New York Times reported it with a jaw-dropping statistic, which was that the highest income earners in the United States of America were outliving the lowest income earners by a decade or more. Now that's just a really scary statistic. And so there is a very real connection between your financial wellness and your longevity. And it's something people don't like to talk about and they don't like to write about. And it's also connected to your happiness. And I frankly find folks who write about happiness, and I know you cite David Brooks and a lot, and he's like the aficionado on happiness. But for me, David talks a lot about happiness. He never talks about money.
Yeah.
And not only that, he's got Oprah Winfrey, reading the intro to his book as though she somehow has overcome happy. Like I should feel good that Oprah is getting, experiencing happiness when she's sitting in her house and and wherever. Yeah. Anyway, so my and more to that, a lot of the happiness books write about, well, you got to have your job. Well, of course you have your job. And why do you have your job? To earn money.
Yeah.
And so once we start connecting these things in a real sort of way, we can have, I think, a more honest conversation about life and how to get control over it, and to increase the probability, increase the odds you're going to get what you want out of life. And so I think that's the real connection that I make in my book, and the one that y'all start to talk about in that conversation with Ross. And I thought that was a really great conversation, and it's one folks, if they haven't listened to that episode, really should tune in and hear.
Yeah, yeah. No, I agree with you. And the scientist you're referring to, Arthur Brooks, you mentioned he doesn't talk about money, and I agree with you. I don't think he brings money up quite a bit. And I think to your point about Oprah, right? And Oprah's worked her butt off. She's probably done more than I'll ever do in my life. So, kudos to her. But to not talk about it, I think is an important thing. We didn't talk about money when I was growing up in my household, and I wish we had, in a much more productive and pragmatic way, right? Not as a money is good or money is bad. If we talked about money, it was usually in terms of wealthy people and how those individuals don't care about people who are not wealthy and all those things. And it just became a kind of a negative connotation. But I think, to your point, divorce, a big reason people get divorced is money, issues with money, conversations around money, and stress around it, and people don't like to talk about it. What have you found in your research or the work that you do, or maybe just your intuition, is the reason why a lot of people don't want to talk about money?
Yeah, that's a really interesting conversation, and I don't have a good answer for that. I it's 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 so upsetting that we teach kids in our schools in the United States, anyways, different languages, so that we say, well, you should learn. Yeah, it's a requirement to learn another
Mm,
language, but yet we don't teach them the language of money. And so money and financial literacy is a language in and of itself. And if you don't understand the language, how can you be expected to discuss it, talk, and even deal with it? And so what I think about, and what my conclusion was as I was thinking about, again, writing the book, which was the only thing that I could really discern between those who have money and those that don't have money are the degree of financial literacy that the individuals have. In other words, people who have financial literacy, in my experience, and I've met a lot of people, I've been on this earth 58 times around the sun, and I've met a lot of rich people and a lot of, well, I'll call financially rich. And I think that's a term we should maybe talk a little bit about, which is
mm.
financial wealth versus wealth. Because
Ah.
I think wealth and financial wealth are confused. I
Mhm.
think wealth is something other than just pure financial wealth. So
I
let's just
love
talk about
that.
financial riches.
Sure.
But people who have all of their wants and needs taken care of from a financial perspective, and I know that's central to your philosophy, which is, look, we need enough financial resources to have our basics covered. And once we have those basics covered, then it's just a mind game, right? And
Mhm.
how much and what and the psychology of money, the book, The Psychology of Money,
Mhm.
wonderful book. And
Yeah,
he
that's on my
he
shelf.
coins the term, and brings the term enough,
Mm,
right? So when do you have, that's an individual construct. And so, getting control of this mental journey, but also having the financial literacy, what I found was that, in my experience, people who have financial literacy have their needs really well cared for, and then are just working against this mental game of the wants.
mhm,
And so and in my book, I back it off. I'm like, let's start with financial literacy right now. Do you know what an asset is? Do you know what a liability is? Do you know what a profit? And I explain it. I didn't even want to go past that. Just rip past that and refer to some YouTube video, say, watch this and get your basics on financial literacy. No, let's stop. If you know this stuff, skip ahead.
sure.
Okay. If you know this stuff, skip ahead, but I'm not letting you go past this part because it's foundational. It's
Mm,
foundational. If you don't have this, again, I think you guys talked about in the other podcast with Ross, which was, well, what's the first step someone should do if they only have a couple $1,000? They should work on their financial literacy, man. They should get more educated around money, learn the language of money. So just bringing it back to your topic, which is, why don't we talk about money? Why is that a hard conversation? I think for the most part, we don't learn the language of money. And so that makes it difficult to speak of objectively. And so then we infuse it with these words that feel very emotive and judgmental and accusatory and so on and so forth. So that then drives into this somewhat difficult conversation when it should be just about, hey, what is money? What's the language of money? Let's be sure you are equipped to deal with money. The rest is up to you, what you want to do in your journey.
Mm, that's powerful. Yeah. Yeah. I think you're spot on. I think a lot of people tie their ego pretty strongly to money. It's an unfortunate circumstance that we think that how much money we have or make or don't make is somehow tied to our sense of worth as a human. And so that's the unfortunate circumstance I think a lot of people find themselves in, or that fear of judgment. If I don't really I'm an adult, I've been adulting for 25, 30 years now, and I still don't know, what an asset is. And so I don't want to admit that, because then I have to admit there's a lot of things I don't know. And so, yeah, I think that first step, just recognizing that money isn't this pervasive thing that we should know about instantly, or biologically. It's something you have to learn, just like any other skill, just like any other realm. And it's okay to admit you don't know something. In fact, that's the first step to learning is you have to admit you don't know something, to open your mind to the idea that you can get better at it. So I think that that's really powerful. I think we have to touch on that concept you mentioned earlier, John, which was this idea of financially rich or wealthy versus just wealthy in general. That aligns so strongly with the work that I do. The model that I created at its center has directional well-being, because to your point, until you know what you want out of your life, until you know what better actually looks like, how do you know if making another $1 million is the right answer, or even if trying to strive for $1 million is worth the energy, if it's not ultimately what you want to do with your life? And so I'd love to touch on that a little bit more, because it sounds like that's in the work that you do as well. Give us the difference in your mind between what you're saying financially wealthy versus just wealthy.
Sure. In my work, I became heavily aligned with the folks at Blue Zones and Dan Buettner. So, Blue Zones is the study of these 5 disparate geographic places around the world: Okinawa, Japan, Nicoya, Costa Rica, Sardinia, Italy, Icara, Greece. And Loma Linda, California. So, these were the 5 original ascribed blue zones that Dan Buettner, through National Geographic and the National Institutes of Health, did this quest to find the longest living people on Earth.
Yeah.
And this is what he came back with. And what was very interesting about his research was not only were these groups found to live measurably longer without chronic disease, but the really cool thing was they were also found to be measurably happier. Now, that in and of itself was like, okay, great. But what's also fascinating is these places, for the most part, other than Loma Linda, California, are very financially poor.
Mm.
So, so what is it, right? If it isn't money, that are leading to the longest living, happiest people on Earth? And I think that's where some awareness and some thinking about, to your point, what are those core directional things that we as humans can and should focus on to bring fulfillment, to bring happiness, and bring more health into our lives. And so I think the Blue Zones provides a really interesting, call it guideposts, towards what those might look like. I certainly lean into some of the work that Dan has done with the Blue Zones as a way to understand that, and some great research. And I throw those out as guideposts, where there are behavioral guideposts that you can aim towards. You don't have to know exactly, you know, where the trail is. If you can see the guidepost, right, you're heading in the general direction. There may be a storm, there may be a crevasse, there may be something very unexpected going to happen on your journey, but you're heading in the right direction. And if you can kind of move through those challenges while you're heading on the right guidepost, you increase the odds of getting there. And when you're there, you get what you kind of are experiencing, that what are, I'll call, basics of humanity.
Yeah. 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 And the work that I do, there's the 8 different areas that I talk about that allow for people to improve their well being. And in all of those, obviously, each individual is going to have their own definition of success, but there are some metrics that we just know are pivotal in order to let us know that we're on the right track. For instance, financially, we talk about the emergency fund, the working on having that nest egg available, making the simple thing like, is your income more than your outcome? What's your debt to income ratio? All those things that we just know in order to be a healthy human financially, you need to have those things. Same with physical, certain body composition, certain blood pressures, those are the things. And then once you get those basic needs met, you can start to have a conversation around these more pinnacle aspects, right? Which we're really splitting hairs at that point, when you start to get to the top 5% of any of these things. But to your point, there are metrics and milestones that we can use to benefit ourselves. I've done a little bit of research on blue zones. I read the book Ikigai, which talks about the different concepts. We've spoken about Moai and the supportive groups. We talked about Harihachi Bu, which is a Japanese concept of only eating until you're 80% full. So these really simple but profound concepts, I think, are so important. You touched on something too, John, that I think we should talk a little bit about, which is out of all those blue zones, 4 out of the 5 original ones were places that weren't very prosperous financially. And Lloyd Ross and I talked about this idea of most successful people are grateful first, and then they start to work on striving and getting more. And obviously there are exceptions. But do you think there's anything to be said there about these individuals who are happier, even though they don't have a lot of money? Do you think gratitude has anything to do in that space of just being thankful for what they have, or was it something else maybe that led them to that health and happiness?
Well, I haven't interviewed any of those folks,
Sure, sure.
but in reading what Dan's produced and others, and kind of I think where you come to gratitude, and I know you speak about this, is this mindset, right? What is your native state? What is your native mindset? And what are you focused on? Being grateful as a precursor for having abundance, right, is, I believe, a requirement. I mean, that certainly, what else? And so I think there's sort of core tenets. And to your point, even before the minutia of even sort of what are these measurable goals, just even having a very clear intention of being focused on your health, and having and acknowledging you how much agency and control you have over your own health journey, as well as the same over your financial journey, acknowledging that, and building a muscle of resiliency and practice to exercise that agency and control you have over it, then towards those measurable metrics, right, where we can say, am I building, a financial balance sheet? Am I experiencing life without chronic disease and pain or other aspects? Or am I feeling mentally and healthy and well? No one, no. So how do you get control of this mind? Is a real challenge for, I know, me. And as a
Me too.
study, I've been a student of positive psychology, and trying to understand how do we get control over this mind so that we can direct it towards the things that we want out of life.
Hmm.
It was really, again, why my book, and what I'm suggesting is, if you focused on on your health, if you focus on prosperity, the work, right, then you're in the right track.
Hmm.
You can let a lot of things go if you just focus on those two things. And that mindset of being grateful, of being aware of your surround, being self-aware. I mean, those are precursors, right, for self-mastery, which then allow you to move forward, right, in a journey to, if you will, manifest, that which you dream.
Yeah, yeah. That's really cool. So many alignments with some of the studies that I've done and the work that I do and continue to do. In fact, there's a lot of similarities between you and I. You have much better hair than I do, much more long and flowing. Uh, but one of the things I want to touch on, John, is kind of your journey into this world, because I know you know longevity FP, so financial planning and longevity and how it all plays together. But you also are an ultra endurance athlete, 5 Ironmans, I believe. And so
5X, yeah.
yeah, so many phenomenal things that you're doing, and I think striving in all of these different areas, to me, grit and striving and resilience can bleed into a lot of different areas of our life. But I'd love to hear a little bit more. You've talked off air with me about this, but tell me a little bit more about kind of what got you into this interest of financial planning and how it aligns with longevity. Like, how did that journey come about?
Yeah, I've been in the financial services industry for many years. Started my career on Wall Street, went to law school, planned to go back to work on Wall Street, and they said, we don't hire lawyers. I'm like, but I couldn't read, write, or think. And so, anyways, so my career then really forced me to be this entrepreneur in the financial services field. And what I would say about, and I kind of stumbled backwards. I like to say I came from the mailroom of the financial services industry. I started in the mailroom and worked my way through it. And through that, I began working in and around the longevity space. And what was so befuddling to me, which was this whole financial services industry is built really around the longevity profiles of the consumers you serve. In other words, when you're 30, you do things financially different than when you're 80, right? I mean, it drives every financial product and strategy and life insurance. It drives the pricing of the underlying products. I mean, it is like core to all of financial planning and services. And yet the industry was sort of like completely ignorant to it, like completely like, what? Oh, you mean the health and longevity and happiness of my clients? Like that's the role of financial products and strategies, is to support the financial health and happiness of my clients. Maybe I should think about that and talk to my clients about those things first before I recommend products and services, so I can make sure that they're doing what they're supposed to do. And so, and not only that, my career then led me down to the life insurance industry continues to use tests for longevity. Not that they don't work, but were developed in the 60s and 70s. And I was like, there has to be a better way to think about and predict how long we're going to live. And that led me to discovering molecular biomarkers, specifically the epigenetic clock and epigenetic biomarkers, which are biomarkers of gene expression, that there's an entire world of science that was open and available for the industry to move dramatically forward in a way that would allow them to get out of the blood and urine specimen collection and testing business, and move forward in both the accuracy and the convenience of buying the products that they wanted to provide, as well as providing very interesting and valuable insights to the consumers they served. That journey really led me down to, again, I write about this in the book, where just like in financial well-being, the molecules, right, of financial well-being are financial literacy, right? In health, the molecules of health are DNA. And what is DNA? And how then do we have agency over gene expression? How much control? Where does that happen? What's that biological mechanism? And that's a whole field called epigenetics. That's called gene expression. It's the epidermis. It's the outer layer, the skin of the genome. And what happens is through lifestyle, right, we impact through chemical modifications gene expression. So that's called epigenetics. It's the study of gene expression. And what that showed me, it was like the light bulb went. I'm like, oh my God, lifestyle directly impacts upstream our health at a molecular level. And when we know how that's working and how we have control or agency over it, we can be confident in the downstream result of better health, or the odds of experiencing better health. So that's a big synopsis of my journey in and around the intersect between financial services and health and longevity. So yeah, I'll shut up there for a minute, but
No,
it's
I love it. I love it. And you went so deep on so many levels, and I think that that's phenomenal. Because honestly, when I'm looking for podcast guests, you saw this, and so does everybody. I'm looking for those who love what they do. They're very passionate. They're very obviously gifted in it and knowledgeable in it. They're experts, but they also recognize that it's not just one part to play. All of these things are interconnected, and so you very articulately, there's a word that I can't say articulately. So you very clearly shared that depth of the connection between financial wellness and physical wellness. And I love that. You mentioned too this idea that this system of financial planning is a little bit archaic, right? That might be a over exaggeration of it, but still built on some foundational things that were made a long, long time ago and haven't caught up to the process and speed of technology these days, which nobody can really keep up with the speed at which technology is advancing these days. But I see a similar thing in the medical field as well, right? We're still talking about sick care and calling it healthcare. And Peter Attia talks about this in his book. You and I have talked a little bit offline about that. So he shares kind of that idea of what, in an ideal world, what would, he calls it medicine 3.0 really look like. So could you give me an inkling into what you feel the financial planning world, if it was doing it the right way, how would they help people? What would that look like for you?
Yeah, first of all, I mean, yeah, big shout out to Peter Attia and health and how he describes, who we are as human beings and what this thing called a human being, how it works and functions, and how to, again, take control and agency over it. In the financial services industry, I guess stay tuned. I'm working on some very innovative. I was going to say innovative. Try to get a word, articulate. But some very innovative products. I think there's some very exciting innovation to bring forward to folks, and I'm working on that right now. That Longevity Financial Partners will launch in 2025. So there's some really unique things to do. It's a difficult industry to um, push on because it's so large and it's dominated by such large organizations. Life insurance companies are so big and so difficult to affect change. But annuities, but we're facing a financial retirement crisis in the United States of America. Social Security is financially bankrupt. I've been writing about lately on my blog the retirement fallacy. This idea of Social Security this idea of retirement at 65. That's a totally artificial construct that was created in the 1890s, and then it was codified in 1935 with the Social Security Act. That was created at a time when people didn't live much past 65. Okay. We're now in a place where people are living decades longer than 65. And so the system itself just wasn't set up to fund, people living decades, nor were people set up to spend decades playing golf and I call it a retirement fallacy. I mean, you can do it if you want, I would say, but there's also studies that talk about how once people go into retirement, they die, their longevity, curtails, depression arises. So there's a reason to really start rethinking, I'll call longevity in the context of retirement and financial planning with products and discussions. I mean, individuals today have to self-fund their retirement. They cannot rely on Social Security. There's just no way. First of all, it won't give you enough money to do much of anything. Sure. Second of all, it's probably bankrupt and it's probably going to get restructured. So individuals are really they have to self-fund their retirement. And the industry needs to move forward with innovative financial products that better support living longer with financial security. And so how the industry moves forward that way will be very interesting. I hope to play an important role in that in the coming months. And stay tuned.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that. I think that's an important thing that we need to continue to consider is, especially when people don't want to talk about money, right? I think there's this fallacy, like you mentioned, of this Social Security fairy that's going to come and sprinkle money on us because we're old. I think a lot of people think that's, and I don't like to pick on younger individuals because I think that they're a phenomenal generation of human beings and admittedly maybe aren't being served as well as they could be served. But I think some of the younger generations who just aren't being taught these types of things, they hear the term retirement and they think, oh, when I get to be a certain age, society will take care of me. And so financially, right? There's a whole argument about culturally how we should, like the Indian culture it very much supports the idea of taking care of your parents. Like that's that's venerated in their culture, right? So you go back to live in your hometown to take care of your parents. It's just expected. But financially, we think of this idea like people are just going to take care of us because we're old. And I just don't think that we're doing justice to individuals to help them see a different way. So, John, you mentioned this, and you mentioned that there's some things that are coming up. So I'm excited to keep following you and hear more about those things. But can you give anybody an inkling of hope that of some bright, shiny future, some things that you might see that so that we're not sitting here going, "Oh God, I can never retire. I can't enjoy myself, and I got to work the rest of my life." What are your thoughts there?
No, yeah, no, it's not all bad. I'll go back to look. I mean, go back to this idea of the blue zones and kind of this people are living longer without disease, without chronic disease. Their health span is so. I think the thing that folks, let's just take agency. The thing that folks should be thinking about is how do I care for this body right now so that it it's the same saying as it's expensive to be poor, right? Everyone knows it's very expensive to be poor. Try to go get a loan, go to a pawn shop, very expensive. Okay, it's the same way. It's very expensive to be sick. You know, and as we get older, and again, how do we age, and what does aging look like, and how to think about aging, so that we're setting ourselves up to increase our health span, so we're less dependent on others, and the cost of growing old is much less. And so I think we can think about healthy aging, right, in the context of making our dollars go a lot further and being less dependent on others. I think multi-generational living is wonderful. I mean, that's a blue zone tenant, right? I mean, it's great, providing you like your kids and your parents. I mean, like, that's a whole nother dynamic.
Sure.
But I think if we focus on healthy aging, that's it's like focusing on healthy financial planning, and I think those two things go hand in hand. And so that you can set yourself up where, again, like these folks in the blue zones, they don't have much money, but yet they're living long, happy, healthy lives. If they can do that in blue zones, we can do it here in the United States. And we need to learn how to blue zonify our own lives. Right. And that's where we kind of start to step into this, which is how do we take steps today to blue zonify ourselves, to set ourselves up for success in the future, particularly when we're 80 and 90 and hopefully 100, so that we're having our best days during those days when we're less robust and more dependent.
Hmm. Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. There's Toby Keith sang a song called "Don't Let the Old Man In," it was originally done by Willie Nelson, maybe somebody before that. But one of the lines in that song for one, it's a very moving song. But one of the lines in there said, "Ask yourself how old you'd be if you didn't know the day you were born." And I think that
Mm,
yeah. Because if you don't know, if you don't know when you're born, this whole, well, I'm 50 now, so I can't do the things I used to. Well, you don't know if you're 50. I mean, how old are you? We talk, in our world, we know the concept of chronological age versus biological age, right? Like the idea of like, yes, I'm 50 years old, but biologically, I'm as fit as a 37-year-old or whatever it happens to be. And so I think that you're talking a really important aspect of all this, which is, you know, we can't control what the future is going to look like, what inflation is going to look like, all of these, if Social Security will or will not be there. But I tell you what, it is so much less expensive to not have to buy medications, to not have to pay for all of these different tips and tricks and these things that are trying to keep us from being sick, which is not the same thing as keeping us healthy. And that the majority of things that do keep us healthy are free. Exercise can be free. Walks in nature can be free. Clean water, for the most part. And again, I'm very blessed to be living where I am, doing what I am. But I think that that's a huge aspect of this entire conversation. When I owned a fitness facility, we talked about. I used at the time Peggy Swarbrick's 8 Dimensions of Wellness, and one of them was financial. And I had a huge sign on our wall that talked about how working out at our facility can help in all these different areas. And people would argue, well, you're not helping their financial wellness. They have to pay a lot of money to come and train with you. I said, you could call it a lot of money, but you know how expensive a knee replacement is? You know how expensive diabetes medication is? These are the things that we aren't considering when we talk about this conversation of longevity plus financial well-being. So I think that's such a poignant topic that I'm sure you touch a lot about in your book.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, and
Yeah.
again, like you said, the agency and control we have over that, and how do we make deposits against those future withdrawals? Um, that's, we're all going to experience some, mental and physical decline. So how do we make deposits in our healthy aging account early on, so that we're well equipped to take those withdrawals without getting loans, and again, just using that financial analogy as our own health bucket, I think is incredibly important. The other thing to think about too, as you age and as you're preparing yourself, is how do you set your environment up for healthy aging? How do we make the harder things easier? And again, that's a way in which to whether it's, again, in the financial context, that's where, well, I'm going to have an automatic, deposit from my paycheck and put it in my investment account, right? I mean, so how do we do that in the other aspects of our life, around movement, around eating, around purpose, around relationships? We need to make all of those aspects more automatic, easier to engage in, because those are the core kind of inputs, so to speak, in healthy aging and healthy longevity. And those will reduce the overall costs and expense of growing old. And it doesn't cost anything to have friends. It doesn't cost anything to live with purpose. It doesn't, I mean, food costs money, but being thoughtful about what you put in your mouth and drinking less alcohol, it will save you money. So,
Mm-hmm.
um, so those are all areas that we all could, I think, stand to improve on. I know I can.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of times convenience costs more. We have to pay more for convenience, fast foods, deliveries, all of those things. And the convenience is what is actually detrimenting us, because the convenience piece is what keeps us from doing the things that our body needs in order to adapt to the stressors involved with things like, exercise. And so I'm a little bit different, as I'm sure you are, because you have done a lot of really hard things in your life. I currently have a 20-pound plate in my backpack that I walk around with because I'm training for lowest to highest. And every step that I take with that backpack on is quote unquote training, right? But even then, I still take the stairs when I'm carrying that thing. Right. I identify with myself as like, I walked up the stairs the other day and I was carrying it. I'm like, this is really heavy. I'm way more out of breath than I need to be. But then I thought about, like, you know, the fact that I never once considered taking the elevator, even if I don't have the plate. That's just how I've identified myself. And so, to your point, this idea of can I change the way that I do very small things, not stressing about getting the closest parking spot to the door. And
Yeah.
people get angry. For one, stressor is one of the most impactful killers that we have, right? Stress kills us. And like stressing about getting closer to the door so you don't have to walk less, but then also thinking that you have to exercise more. It's like all of these different conflicting ideas. That's why one of my first core values is purpose. Like, be intentional about that. What if you parked a little bit farther from the door? What if you took the stairs every time and you just identified with that type of person? All of those things are free and available for you to insert, but there has to be a mindset shift of, I don't have to rush to the next thing. I don't have to be first. I don't have to cut this other person off so I can get to my job quicker, so that I can, like, you have to have this intentional mindset shift in order to be able to implement those things.
100%. I mean, you're dead on. I love that analogy. Park far away. I love parking far away. I don't have to worry about banging someone else's door. I can, you take it's 20 more steps, and what is, or 50 more steps. You get more steps in. And I'm right with you on the stairs. I always take the stairs.
Mhm.
It's, I had this rule on when I would travel for business a lot. I always carried my bag, no roller bag allowed. You
Love
have
it.
to carry that bag.
Yeah.
So there's all these little, you just can gamify it, but every day you're taking, you're either making a deposit or withdrawal. So are you making, how many deposits can you make during the day in your own health, in your own financial bank account, in your own happiness account, right? You want to be depositing and compounding in every aspect of your life all day long, every day. That's, and we can talk about time. I'd love to just chat about time for a minute, because you want to make
Please.
those deposits. The longer you can make those deposits, and they compound, the greater your life is. And that to me is the wealth, right? So we touched a little bit about this financial wealth versus wealth. That's wealth. When you're expanding in all of those aspects of your life, that's a wealthy life. And I don't care who I meet, but because if they're expanding in every one of those aspects of their life, I don't give a shit about their bank account. I'm interested in them as a person, as an individual, because I'm fascinated, like how many friends they have and how social, and all the things that they're doing, and the perspective they bring to life has nothing to do with their bank account, And so all of that. And in fact, when someone says, well, their perspective on life is only through their bank account, it's like boring. I mean, it
Hmm.
really is. It's just kind
Yeah.
of boring. It's just
Sure.
boring. Because once you get money, anyone can have it. It's like, that's the entry point. That's the cost of the entry. So, I mean, it's not that it's easy to get, and I like money, and but still, I just believe that wealth is this, uh, wealthy individuals have compounded every aspect of their life. And I think even in the conversation you had with Ross, which was how he talked about, Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger, these guys compounded their lives in very virtuous ways. They didn't go down the hedonic paths.
Hmm.
They really added something to this wealthy. Sure, they were financially rich beyond belief, but they were wealthy individuals.
Hmm. I love that. I love that. That it reminds me. I had a little aha moment where I realized that the intentionality that I was making in my life was coming to fruition. I love pickleball. If anybody knows me, I'm a pickleball fanatic, and I was playing pickleball at a local place at about 8 o'clock in the morning. And at 8 o'clock in the morning, as you can imagine, the pickleball people there are retired is the easiest way that I can say that. Right? There's a certain demographic, and I love them to death. They're still kicking my butt, and I'm probably 20 to 30 years younger than them. But I remember one guy looking at me and going, "Why are you here? Or do you work night shifts or something?" And I just had this aha moment of like, I am building the life that I want, right? I'm not a millionaire by any stretch of the imagination, but I get to play pickleball at 8 o'clock because of the way that I've built my life. Intentional decisions with how we've structured our family circle, how I've decided on my work, what I do for a living, the type of house that I have, the type of car that I drive. I'm not bound by bills and financial restrictions that require me to make decisions that go against who I am and what I want, because I know what I want out of life. And so, very similar to you, if you show me the person that makes $40,000 a year and gets to go mountain biking on the weekends with their friends and leaves their work at home and loves to have deep, meaningful conversations around the fire, let's go. Let's hang out all day long. Those are the people I want to be with. And admittedly, too, the people that make millions of dollars, but they did it with purpose, and they want to do something with it and make the world a better place. Like, all day for all of those.
Yeah, it's all that, again. That's that distinction between financial wealth and wealth. Those are wealthy individuals. Wealthy individuals are expanding with intention, expanding their life in these very rich and I'll call virtuous ways. Their family, their careers, their intellect. I mean, it's really fun to interact with them and talk about those. It's really it's those are healthy, wealthy people who I hope live a long time.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it. Well, that gets me curious then, John, because obviously we talk about financial wellness and how yes, it's important, but not as important as everything else, and it's a piece of it and all that thing. So there's a lot of different places. In my model, there's 8 different places that you could really start to pour into your wealth. But I'd love to hear from you, maybe from the work that you do with clients or what you've learned over the years. Where would be a good place for somebody who just is sitting back and going, I'm okay, I'm not great, but I want to be a wealthy person. They heard what you said. It resonates with them, and they say, I want to be wealthy in more ways than just financial wellness. What might you tell them as a good kind of launching point or starting point? Obviously, knowing that we don't know everything about this person.
Well, I mean, I think you put your finger on the button. I want to be healthy and wealthy, and I want to live for a long. I want to experience the good things in life for as long as possible. The presence of mind or self awareness that that's what I want. I want to achieve that. I'm going to bring my focus, my intention towards that. I would say that's the starting point. So then, how do you then start to move down that channel to get that right? So you're bringing those things about. I mean, I break it down very simply, and I do it in the book, which is all right. Well, it's what do we do every single day? What are you doing for that health, that healthy body, and that healthy mind? That requires movement and eating wisely. Bottom line, right? You got to be moving, and I don't care how you move. It's lowest to highest, which is an incredible ultra challenge, amazing, and I think ultra events provide a great context to challenge this muscle. How bad do you want it? When the road's going to get hard, are you willing to keep going? But if you've never done any of these, you can start with a 5K. So start with a 5K. Walk a 5K, put it on the calendar, sign up, and go walk one. You might then do a 10K. So my point is just do some form of movement. And then when next time you're out and you're at the restaurant or you're deciding on which restaurant to eat, is it McDonald's or, Salads and Us? I mean, and if it is McDonald's, are you choosing the quarter pounder with cheese and a large fry? Or are you getting the salad? I mean, so these are micro decisions that we need to start taking, and you can take them today. So how you do that is you start taking those decisions today. You develop a practice of doing it. It's compounding. It's little steps every single day, and the same way on your finances. I mean, if you've got a drawer full of receipts and bills that you're avoiding, you know what to do.
Mm.
If you've got a if you haven't balanced your checkbook or your complete your taxes, do them. You have to start doing these things. You need to take action, and you'll get some positive feedback loop towards that intention and purpose. And then I think you want to develop these positive feedback loops. I use journaling as a daily prompt journaling as a tool by which I keeps me going on that right path where I can set that intention. I can specifically state my priorities, and then I can measure myself. Did I take those actions? And if not, I'll carry them over to the next day. It's okay. Believe me, I'm not perfect, and I fail miserably all the time.
You and me
So,
both, brother.
but I come back to them. Yeah, yeah. So I come back to them. So I guess that's how I would encourage someone: is congratulations, you've won you've already won the race because you've set intention and purpose towards this. Now, two, take action in furtherance of that intention and reward yourself and acknowledge that to develop self mastery.
Mm. Yeah, I think that's phenomenal. I own an event management company. We have put on 5Ks, 10Ks before. And people I'm always like, hey, congratulations. One of them's a ruck, and they finish and they're last, right? And they're like, I'm like, hey, congratulations, great job. They're like, yeah, I'm last. And I said, no, you're not. The people who are last are the ones that didn't show up to try. So you beat millions of people who were unwilling to even try. And so I think it's so important that what you're sharing is this idea of shifting mindset. There's always this argument kind of in psychology of like, do we think first and then act? Do we have to believe in ourselves and then act, or vice versa? And at the end of the day, for me, it's like, pick one and do it and then see which one happens. But I think there is a lot of power in acting, thinking like, there's this whole postulation that if you identify with a healthy person first, like I am a healthy person, what would a healthy person do? And then you act on that. And then that basically kind of reinforces the identity. Like I chose not to eat the whole burger. I threw the last bite out. That's what a healthy person would do, right? Like even if it's something that small. Andy Galpin, who does a lot of work on physiology, he talks about one of his clients. They literally all they changed was he still went to McDonald's, but he threw away the last bite of his sandwich, and he ended up losing 10 or 20 pounds just from that. And so, to your point, taking action, and then that reinforces that identity that you have, that you are a healthy person, you do healthy, or you're a wealthy person, right? I'm wealthy in all these different areas. And we have a journal as well. So we believe obviously in the power of journaling. I journal every morning. And again, like you, like I have a habit tracker in mind, and there are many days where I'm like, whoops, didn't do that today. But it's this, people who say, well, what if I do the 5K and I don't finish in the time I shot for? It's like, well, that wasn't the goal. The goal was that you signed up and tried, right?
You got out. You got
Yeah.
out. You're moving. You're
Yep.
moving, and it will. You'll surprise yourself once you start taking those actions in furtherance of that intention. You'll surprise yourself, and you'll be amazed what you can achieve. You can even start at Badwater and finish at Mount Whitney.
That's the
That's going to be a
goal.
beast of an event, bro. I want to hear. I want to hear more about that one. Talk about a BHAG.
Uh,
That's a rough one.
I
Woo.
appreciate it. It's going to be an interesting one to say the least, and I'm going to enjoy the journey while I'm out there for sure. And that's it. I mean, that's the whole thing is like if I take one more step, I've won. And I'm going to win every single step. And if I don't finish for whatever reason, I still had thousands of steps where I won. But man, do I want to stand on the top of Mount Whitney? Yeah, absolutely I do, right? And so if I can keep that mentality with every step, I'm going to get there a lot better than what a lot of people do, which is, am I on Mount Whitney yet? No. Well, then I failed. I failed until I'm there. It's like, how do you can't go into something that large, which is similar to life, right? With this mentality of every step that isn't the finish is a loss. Um, it's not how you play the long game, right?
Right. That's absolutely right. I did like you mentioned, I did a number of ultra events, and everyone, when I was doing them, I was much rather people say, well, what are you training for next? I'm training for life. I mean, I use these as life training exercises because you're going to hit these moments where things are hard. At least I showed up. I'm there with a smile, and I'm looking around at everyone else, engaging and moving and celebrating that we're just here. That goes back to this gratitude. So again, that's what I would say to someone. You just start. Just start wherever you are. Just start. You will go much further and much farther than you think you can or will. But you got to start.
Yeah. Yeah. John, you shared with me off the air a really powerful story that has to do with your mother. And if you're willing to share that story, I think that would resonate really deeply with people as to kind of why this was important to you and a lesson that you learned from your mother.
Well, when I believe it was just talking about writing the book and starting this new company again, Longevity Financial Partners. As I mentioned, I've worked in and around the financial services industry, around longevity. But for me, it was always an actuarial table, a molecular biomarker of aging or health or wellness. And so it was somewhat objective and impersonal. I was starting this new business, and my mother got sick. She had cancer, and she had decided that she was 83 at the time. And she said, I'm not going to do chemotherapy. I've had this amazing life. My life's been a dream. And she looked at me and my father and said, you don't get it, guys. No one gets out of this alive, you know? And so my life's been a dream, and I'm happy, and I just want to be comfortable. And of course, my dad and I were looking at each other like, that wasn't the plan, Mom. I mean, like, whoa, 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 whoa. But it was an incredible 6 months that I got to spend with her. And it brought longevity, this concept of longevity, home and personal in a way that, again, I personally was taking for granted. I was into health already. I was, working hard. I did all these things and I was studying it, but I didn't recognize just how invaluable this asset of us, our invaluable asset of longevity, our health span, how long we're alive to do the things we love to do, the people to be with the people we love. And it brought it home in a way that was really obviously personal. And at the time, all I could do was write. I couldn't work on my business for 6 months. I could just care for mom, but I could write. And so it gave me a way to personalize my own journey and put it in that book to, again, provide a blueprint or guideposts in a way that, again, everyone's on their own individual journey, but hopefully at the end, it would allow them to say, my life's been a dream. That's where you want to be. And it was a beautiful moment. And, I miss her, incredibly, but, the fact that that's where she was at that time was just, the most incredible experience and lesson that she could share. And hopefully, again, the book kind of sets out a construct for folks for some, very practical instruction about how at the end you can look back and say, my life's been a dream. I mean, that to me is the goal. That would be the goalpost, at least for me.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's almost scary, I think, to think about the number of people who are sitting right now doing something that does not matter to them. That, and whatever that happens to be, no judgment. It could be scrolling on TikTok or streaming or whatever, answering the umpteenth email to somebody you don't like to work with, right? But so many things that they're doing that doesn't matter. And if you stop them in that moment and said, if you died right now, would you be happy with how your life turned out? And their response is no. That's scary. And I'm fortunate enough that now, don't get me, I have a 6-year-old at home. So every second that I get a chance to pour into him and be a part of his life, I will never take for granted. And I have my good days and my bad days. But at 38 years old, I can say, if somebody asked me, if you died tomorrow, would you be happy with how your life turned out? And I'd say absolutely. And the reason I say that is because there's so many people that tell the story about how they had a near death experience and how every moment after that they felt like it was a gift. My dream, my hope for myself and my hope for everybody else is, don't wait for the near death experience. Just make that decision now. Every moment from this point on is a gift. And like your mother said, my life has been a dream, and I'm going to continue to build it in that way.
That's
So
amazing. And that's right. I mean, because you're compounding every aspect. You're working with intention and purpose and taking action to compound the good thing as much out of life as possible. And I think when that's happening for you, if you're focused on the right things, the odds of you getting those things really do increase. And so that always puts you in this position of being grateful. I mean, what you're saying is you're grateful for your life, period. If it ended today, you were grateful for every moment. You want more. We all want more. We wanted more,
sure.
mom. Yeah,
Yeah. Yep.
but there's this thing called the human body. It's at one point it's so resilient and incredibly like strong, and at the same time it's so fragile, and we're here for such a short period of time, and we're all going to end up in the same place. So,
Yeah.
and I love that when you and Ross were talking about that aspect. And here's the other here's the other news flash for folks if they're listening. Time accelerates as you grow older.
Mm-hmm.
So here's the other crazy thing about this thing called life and aging is, as you're growing older, as you're getting closer to the end, your perception of clock time accelerates. And that is very frightening, which also suggests you really have to, take a moment, get control over your mind, so to speak, and start building in these areas on a daily basis, like you're suggesting, where it matters. Each moment
Yeah.
and each decision matter.
Yeah. I love that. I love that. Thanks for sharing that. So, John, with a few minutes here left, you have the book Healthy, Wealthy Longevity, and I think it's going to resonate with a lot of people who are listening. But who do you think, because a lot of people listening also have a laundry list of books like myself to read. So if you really wanted that one person to be like, yeah, this book is for you, I need you to pick this book up and read it, who would that person be? How would you describe him?
That's a funny question, only because um, this weekend, my neighbor here, I'm down in the Baja, Mexico, experiencing my dream and living on the beach. It's incredible. Although there was this comment, you guys, Ross talked about the beach house syndrome. I'm not going to have the beach house syndrome. But why I bring that up was my neighbor's son, who was 29 years old, was celebrating his 29th birthday with a bunch of high school friends. And, it was a pretty neat, unique, special birthday. They normally do some other trip. This year they came down here. Fine. Why I mention that is because on Sunday afternoon, I walked over we celebrated his birthday the night before, so on forth, and then we're all going to watch the Timberwolves beat the Lakers, the LA Lakers, which was really exciting. It's game 4 tonight, I believe. Yeah, 3-1. Okay. So anyways, my point being is I grabbed a stack of books and a stack of journals, and I walked over, and all the guys were kind of sitting around and then having a beer and on the deck. And I said, look, I get this question a lot, which is, who did I write this book for? And oftentimes I have to make up some sort of generalized answer. But what I told them, and this is the truth, I wrote this book for you. I wrote this book for you guys. And by you guys, I just mean young adults, okay, between the ages of 27 and 35. And I'm telling you, if you are in that zone, man, this book is written for you. And I will tell you, if you get this book and if you follow it, or any pieces, if hopefully it resonates with you, it will contribute to getting the life of your dreams, because I'm living the life of my dreams, right? And so I'm writing from experience. It's not an academic journal. It's science backed, but it's not an academic journal. I'm living on the beach. I'm living a life of my dream. And so the only way I know it works is by practicing it and experiencing the results of this practice. And so that's who the book is. I'd say the ideal customer for the book is, of course, any age, lifelong learners. If you want to learn about DNA, what we're made of, our DNA, how our genes express, your DNA accounts for only 20 to 30% of who you are. If you want to learn what the 80 to 70% of you is and how it comes about, read the book. If you don't know what a stock or a bond or a financial net worth balance sheet is, get the book. So if you want to learn about journaling and self-mastery, get the book. So if we're a lifelong learner, there's something for everyone, but I describe something called the longevity factor, and that's this idea of time and compounding. And when you're younger, the simple fact is you've got more time to compound every aspect of your life. And so really that would be my core message to whom that book could best serve.
I love that. And there's a lot of those individuals listening right now, so I'm guessing they're going to pick that up. So John Sabes, buddy, I appreciate you so much for the opportunity. Thank you for sharing your dream with the rest of the world so that they can start to build their own. I appreciate you.
Thank you, Coach. Appreciate your work and your podcast. You're doing great work. Thanks. And good luck on the low to high mission, baby.
That's right. I will keep you posted personally.
Okay.
All right. Make it a good one.
You too. Take care.
What a phenomenal episode. Who knew this interconnection between our financial wealth, which very different than our normal wealth, and all of the different exposure to who we are as a person and our genetics and the depth that can play in our financial well-being. Also had a phenomenal story from his mother about this idea of my life being a dream. What a great story. If you want to learn more about what it means to be financially wealthy, but also just wealthy in life, then make sure that you're subscribing to this podcast, The Next Better Podcast, on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen. Check us out on YouTube at The Next Better, or anywhere that you want to find our content. Follow me, Coach Woody, on LinkedIn, and we'll be happy to have more conversations around this idea of being wealthy in all 8 areas of your life. Until next time, make it a great day.